Good morning and welcome to ASL's HR in 10.
At 10,
I'm Jason Perry
and I'm Kimberly Bradshaw.
and we're delighted to be back for the first HR in 10 of 2022. Seems like a long time.
It feels like we've been away years, Jason, not just a
Indeed.
couple of weeks.
Indeed. And as ever, there's lots going on. One day, I know I said this a few times, but one day we're going to start a session without talking about COVID. Do you think it's going to be this year?
Not today, anyway. Maybe this year.
It's not today, you're right. I saw a really interesting piece in the Times yesterday, and I know this is one of those ones you and I might disagree on, which is a rare thing. But it's a guy called Professor David Heyman, who was chairman of Public Health England, and he's suggesting we're at the beginning of the end, and we're moving into endemic and not pandemic.
Yes, I mean, I know he's an expert and a specialist, but I'm very cynical about this, as you know, Jason. Although, having said that, I do, people that I've spoken to through, the course of the working day and what have you, people seem to be a lot more optimistic than they were this time last year.
Yeah.
However, looking at our local cases, we've got nearly 1,000 more cases than our highest ever peak. And
Yes.
I know we've got less deaths and hospitalisations, but, to me, it's still a pandemic.
Do you know the bit that I struggle with when I try and get my head around what's going on with Omicron is I think we're only 6 weeks into Omicron. And that seems amazing because it kind of feels like we've been battling in this horrific phase of rates rocketing for ages, but it is only 6 weeks. And in some parts of London, they are coming down. Hospital numbers are coming down. So the optimist in me wants to think he might be onto something. And I guess this brings out a whole range of things as to what employers do. We've got IKEA talking about only paying SSP for people who are not double jabbed or who have chosen not to be double jabbed. And we've got other employers out there. We came across one this week who's actually forcing more isolation than the government require. And all this at a time when I think the government are probably about to lower isolation to 5 days.
Yes, it makes me wonder what's driving that organisation.
Nerves, I think.
Well, yes, but what in particular? Because certainly I can see, a lot of employers, are panicking about potential absence rates. But that seems to be making it worse, not better.
Yes, I think I describe it as an abundance of caution, but at a point where they haven't yet looked and understood what's going on with Omicron. Because probably 2-3 months ago, such an approach may have seemed wise. What we now know is Omicron is something like 30 times less dangerous than Delta. And you start looking at that and say, do you want to enforce additional leave when the case numbers are rocketing, it's not very dangerous, and your staff absences might hit 25% anyway, I think you're very quickly going to be backpedaling from that strategy in a matter of weeks.
Exactly, and one assumes that they're paying them full pay because they have insisted on their absence, and so they are duty bound to pay, I would assume.
Legally, if you are an employee and you are sent home for any reason of this type, yes, you have to be paid full pay. And unfortunately, it's more complicated for temporary workers, but for an employee, it's absolute. So it's an interesting one to watch, but I thought we ought to raise that and just see what's going on. As COVID is going on for ages and ages, I'm beginning to feel I'm getting older and nearing retirement and should think about pensions. What do you think?
Oh, beautiful segue into the Pensions Act that went through last week, Jason.
I thought I'd try and do that. But no one noticed.
You should have a career in television.
No, maybe I should. Nobody noticed, did they? 5th of January, there is a bill that was introduced in the House of Commons I didn't hear about. You didn't hear about. I have yet to meet anyone who's heard of it, to be honest, but it's reported in the news that there is a bill to change the way in which auto-enrolment's working.
Yes, and they're thinking of lowering the age to 18 and scrapping the 10,000 earning threshold. So that means that everybody will be automatically enrolled, and then they have to decide whether they're going to uh, duck out or not.
Oh,
Opt out is the actual word.
yeah, it's a massive change. And I know the intention was always to push more and more people into saving for their retirement. But the reality is, this change is going to put a huge additional section. It's only a 4-year age group, but this is a group of people who were excluded before, who are going to be auto-enrolled. But also, it's going to capture people with part-time jobs who've been excluded before. So anyone who's working, 2-3 different jobs to make up their income was excluded because of the earnings threshold, weren't they?
Yes, and I think it's an excellent move. I always wondered it seemed a bit random, 22. People are adults from 18, so why not do that? And I think it's brilliant that everybody is given that opportunity. However, potentially people could be taking home slightly less,
Mm.
and that might be a concern to them.
Well, there's 2 or 3 things that I think need some thought here. One of which is, yes, people are going to take something like a 5% drop in their take-home pay. It's not quite 5% because it's tax adjusted. And that tax is also important because we're going to see our lovely friend Rishi Sunak taking less money as well. Because if the national insurance and tax contributions you pay will be lowered because of pension offset, then we're going to see less money going into the Treasury at apparently a time when they need more, and just at a time when they're about to put national insurance up.
Yes, all fun and games. So
Indeed.
potentially, those on a lower income could be, 5% doesn't seem very much, but when you're,
Yeah.
hand to mouth, that's a huge amount of
Yes.
money to lose each week.
Absolutely. If they're paying more national insurance and they're going to have to pay more pension contribution, and we've not even started to talk about also the employers. And I'm cautious here. I'm not saying all employers are hard done by and struggling, but as we come out of such a difficult financial period, we're talking about employers having quite some large additional contributions. And if you think about this, arguably those in the retail sector, who we know have been struggling, many part-time workers, all of whom now are going to be included, many young workers, are we going to see a 3% additional cost burden on employers that perhaps can't afford that right now?
Yes, and of course, we've got the increases in some of the statutory payments coming up in April. So all these are just going to add to the burden on the employer of employing staff.
Yes, totally. Watch this space. I mean, it's early days. Literally, the first I heard of this pensions bill was yesterday. So I think we need to watch what's going on. But there are very clearly plans afoot to broaden the age range for it and to remove that £10,000 earnings threshold. So
Yeah.
as an employer, expect to be putting more people in. And one concern I heard yesterday is, will that see more opt-outs and more administration for employers? I don't know. I have to say, from personal experience, I don't find the opt-out particularly burdensome. We don't have many of them, but if you've got an efficient scheme, they seem to work quite well.
Yes, although, as you know, we know people that have their employee profile is quite young, and they show the highest rate of opt-outs. So it could add to a bit of
It potentially
admin.
could. It potentially
You know.
could. Shall we talk about salaries? Just wrap up on salaries for a moment. There's some
Yes.
interesting data out there, isn't there?
Oh, huge rises coming in salaries. Now's the time to be in professional services.
Indeed, it is. Robert Walters, I think, was the people behind the research. They've analysed something like 100,000 job postings over the past 12 months, and they've surveyed employers to find out what's going on, and some staggering data. Apparently, as you rightly say, professional services are planning on salary increases of between 10 and 15% in the next 12 months.
which is amazing when you consider that inflation is, tiny percentage of that.
Yeah.
And also, I've worked in professional services for many years, and a typical salary increase might be, 2, 3%. To now go to 10 to 15%, it's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yes. And as you say, inflation, we're expecting to be between 5 and 7% this year
Mm,
at its peak, which is clearly nowhere near 10 to 15. So we're
no.
talking, significant, significantly beyond that level. There's a bit of me that just can't help asking the question: do we think the more junior roles will see the 10 to 15% rises?
Yes, possibly not. And why are they doing it? That
Mm,
is, it's been tough times for everybody. Yes, salary, this is a record growth in salaries, and I'm sure it's been pushed by the recruitment problems of trying to fill roles and skills gaps and that kind of thing. But surely that's only going to do more harm than good. Yes, it's
yes.
lovely for the people that receive the income, but I think what's going to happen as a result of it to the
Well,
economy?
I think what we can say is if we need an accountant or a lawyer in the next 12 months, expect it to cost you a little more. Kimberly, we could talk for hours as ever, but this has been HR in 10 and we've been talking for 11. So for now, we will wrap up and we will be back same time next week.